when the Titans come to reclaim their prize, I will be waiting.
Oh my god, he's so goddamn cool!
Greetings and salutations, everyone. Villains. You love them, you hate them, you love to hate them. And boy oh howdy is Warcraft chock full of some of the most iconic villains out there. From the cunning and wrathful Lich King who constantly taunted us throughout Northrend, to will us into his dark champions, to Gul'dan and his darkening influence and his endless hordes of demons that got the jump on us and took the lives of our leaders. I just love villains and their multitude of origins and designs, but also, of course, the heroes too. I think Warcraft strikes a really good balance with its heroes and villains. But as much as we have phenomenal villains in Warcraft, I'd argue we've kind of fallen off for a bit in that regard, especially in the last 4 or so expansions, before Dragonflight. The primary problems with them was that we simply had far too many twist villains, characters who would show up and steal the spotlight and just go poof unceremoniously. Some of them were even dropped through hints through only toys, of all things. Or villains not properly built up enough and needed to last much longer. And some were just...
Where every soul has its place.
awful. I'm gonna have to talk about him again, aren't I? Fortunately, we've been introduced to the Primal Incarnates, who have some really stunning designs, interesting backgrounds, and just an overall feel to them that, in spite of being completely new characters, feel like they'd fit right into the Warcraft villains of old. These are great villains and have some serious potential. So let's just fly right into it and talk about why these lovely lizards are just so dang enjoyable. Raszagath the Storm-Eater is our first incarnate that we deal with. Raszagath, like all of the incarnates, has her own connection to the elements, hers obviously being wind, which is shown extremely well with her design, with her avian-like features and the flickering of lightning sprinkled about. I personally think she has the strongest appearance out of all of them in their dragon forms. Now, if we're talking about her and her alone in terms of personality and story, I think she would actually tick off quite the similar amount of issues that other villains had, where they're this booming voice that constantly has the ability to stop us, but doesn't. She underestimates us at every turn and disregards her allies. Most commonly similar to our former antagonist, the Jailer, who, being our last villain, is someone I will be comparing the Incarnates to a lot at times in this video. Zovol had the horrible habit of being vague with his plans and goals, underestimating us, downplaying us as foolish mortals, and disregarding very powerful and notable allies to the wind, and constantly sparing us when he easily could have just won. But, not to sound too negative in this video, to Raz's credit against the Jailer though, she's a good precursor of what is to come with her older siblings, and she makes it very evident in what her goals are from the start. Raz at least comes across as a threat that we need to deal with, and is causing issues all around the globe for us, or at the very least the Dragon Isles. She's even the one who all those years ago created problems for Neltharion and his Drakthir. We see her taking action and being a problem, and she, along with her main crony, Kura Grimtotem, are the ones who jumpstart this whole thing. On top of that, her freedom stirs the aspects to be concerned and worried about her releasing her siblings. the other incarnates, who, while are a new and unaddressed threat, feel far more real from how the aspects react to their freedom. The incarnate's whole existence is basically a well-kept secret for dragonkind to keep them all safe, similar to Xal'atath. And that doesn't come off as a weird or forced point in the lore. I could definitely see a conflict for the Proto-Dragons and dragons after the events of Xal'atath and the freedom of accepting the Titan's charge or not. That seems like an actual conflict that would have happened at one point. They also give us a foreshadowing that they are out there and that the aspects do not like the idea of them being freed due to their past with them, as they were even some of their friends in the past. But this is especially noted with Iridikron, their leader, which of course Raszagath succeeds in freeing all three of them just before her own demise much later. Raz was a good first impression on the Incarnates. We get a good idea of what they're about in their simplest of form. They're pissed off at the Titans and the Aspects, by extension, for imprisoning them and also in blindly following the edicts of the Titans. Raz is maybe not perfect perhaps, but definitely is a good spark to the flame that is to come. She certainly needed more victories and less failures, while also not constantly sparing those she came across. But her cause and effect is felt throughout the story, which is important for the grand narrative of Dragonflight. And what I like about her siblings is they do not only show that they care about her demise when they see her fall, and rather than just dismissing her as a cog in the machine of warfare as some other villains might do, they also do point out how she was flawed for underestimating the champions of Azeroth, who had taken down the likes of Deathwing, the Old Gods, and the Lords of the Burning Legion, prior to ever encountering Raszagath. They're a good contrast to what Raszagath previously was doing. With Raszagath done away with, there remain three remaining incarnates: Vyranoth the Frozen-Hearted, Farak the Blazing, and Iridikron the Stonescaled. We'll talk about him last and his potential. Each of them, like Raszagath, has a power over a specific element, which I think their titles and appearances speak for those exact elements alone. And also, like Raszagath, they too were imprisoned for opposing what the Titans planned for the Dragons of Azeroth, though their own prison differed greatly from Raszagath, who was imprisoned within the Forbidden Reach in the same location as the Dracthyr by Neltharion, who is forced to delve into the power of the Old Gods to remove her back then, adding to his story from the past rather than taking something away. We already knew that Neltharion was bound to become connected to the Old Gods, so it's nice to know where it all started. The other three were imprisoned instead in the Vault of the Incarnates, which had far more of a Titan structure to it. And also, unlike Raszagath, unfortunately, we see their visages, which aren't just based on any of the races, but are rather more a reflection of themselves on a smaller scale. Scale, get it? Alright, I'm sorry. Admittedly, while we haven't seen too much of the Incarnates in the time of this writing, their visage form alone drew me towards them, as well as their personified personalities. But before we dig into that, I do want to address our first encounter from them quickly. Immediately when they were freed, we get a very good impression from two of the strongest mages in Azeroth, Kael'gos the Spellweaver, and Khadgar, that the Incarnates were not to be sneezed at, and we needed to get the hell out of there. Which, you know, it's swinging alarm bells when somebody yells to Khadgar to get them out of there.
Khadgar, get us out of here! Khadgar, take us home!
Khadgar, we cannot win this fight. We have to get out of here!
Huh. You know, if I had a nickel for every time that happened, I would have 3 nickels. Which isn't a lot, but it's weird it happened 3 times. So, right from the start, when you first see their visages, you get a very good idea of what each of them is. Vyranoth is the despondent and despairing one, but also quite calculative. Farak is both unhinged and battle-crazed, ready for a fight while also seeking any means of power. And of course, their leader Iridikron is a crafty schemer and wastes very little time. He's probably my favorite of the designs, by the way. He just looks so cool. All of them united by their single purpose to take down the Titans. And from everything we've been given, from their perspective, it makes plenty sense on why they're so bent on making this happen. Also, they just look really cool, which is a plus. Especially Iridikron, who looks like a damn Sith Lord. I know I already called him cool, but it had to be reiterated. So cool. And everything I just said is even before you really hear much of a sentence from their mouths. Their designs say it all, and that says a lot when you've got a really good character design on your hands. Now, as stated, we've seen very little of the three incarnates. Farak, we get a good sense of danger and dread from his raw power of driving headfirst into the Xal'atath caverns, and happily consuming the Shadow Flame, spreading his influence and fire all throughout the Dragon Isles. Likely to pointed next to the World Tree, nesting in the Emerald Dream. Farak is a very simple character with very simple aspirations. He wants power, and he wants others to witness that power. You can clearly see that Iridikron uses this to his benefit, giving him something to do and being the gremlin that he is. He's eager to see it done. I don't docket this as a bad thing, because again, we know what Farak wants. He's constantly shown as a powerhouse, taking down the likes of Abyssian, Rathian, and Sibelian multiple times after consuming the Shadow Flame, or even before consuming the Shadow Flame, showing and telling us that he's strong, even against like the simplest of things that aren't much of a challenge, like the golems or the centaur. And they do this prior to the consumption of the Shadow Flame, so we know that he is a strong contender and a strong opponent for us to face later down the line. And to add to their story and to add to how just strong they were, Vyranoth and Farak were some of the last two in prison, adding to their level of power and strength compared to their younger sister of Raszagath. And, of course, Iridikron was captured last, too. He was the very last captured. There is never a feeling that they feel weaker than her, despite us not encountering them very much. There is something that you could say about him being taken down by both you, the champions, and Chromie in a 5-man dungeon, but he is still taking us very seriously, and I would argue that he still comes out on top even when you do defeat him, which we'll get into that later. Farak, similar to his sister, feels like a large obstacle and threat that needs to be taken out and removed before it's too late. He antagonizes those who face against him, which builds him up more as a villain. Especially since he annihilates several innocent civilians at Loam, and you can just feel that sheer desire and wish to stop him for committing such a heinous act from other characters around you. There's a desire to stop him and avenge the fallen, which is a good thing to have for a hero. It gives them a goal too. For Vyranoth, we see her less, but we've got a good understanding of why she is so cold. Alright, I'm sorry again. In contrast to her brother Farak, who is irredeemable in my eyes, Vyranoth is a bit more complicated. She has a friendship with Alexstrasza of all people, and all of that soured when the eggs were, from Vyranoth's perspective, were tampered with against her wishes by the Titans, which is true. Spinning into the war that we'll likely learn about with Proto-Dragons and Dragons. It'll be a story that we'll be able to get to read, and I'm excited to share and talk about that, but that's a whole other thing. This friendship is shown to us through a conversation from them both, and Vyranoth adds to Alexstrasza's own character too, and how she just doesn't say yes to just about everything the Titans send her way in the mail. She believes that what they did was wrong, and yet Alex seemingly didn't do anything afterwards to oppose this, calling into action that maybe Alexstrasza needs to reconsider her own allegiance, or at the very least take action against such evils, and a voice against the Titans. I feel like this will be character growth for Alexstrasza, which again, a character, or a villain in this case, Vyranoth, is adding to Alexstrasza. adding to other characters like Raszagath added to Neltharion, provoking growth for her, but also potentially for Vyranoth too in the future. Vyranoth seemingly has more of an open door compared to all the other incarnates to stop and be reasoned with. I think you can tell that she's slightly different compared to the other three, yet at the same time clearly is down with the team she is on, if it means vengeance against the Titans. All of them in their own different ways are blinded by their hatred for what the Titans did, even if they are justified. Far more of a complication, but a reasonable one too. Her reasons for opposing the aspects, dragons, and titans is purely because she feels hurt. It's not just for power or dominance like her two brothers have, but rather loss, adding more of a sympathetic angle to her, and we may see her swap sides at the very end. And I think that's an interesting dilemma for her as a character, and it's for us to maybe cheer her on. I like that for a villain. I like the variety. It is, though, interesting to note that while she's very against what the Titans did to the eggs, the Primalists and her team are doing something quite similar to the dragons now too, going against their will before they're even born, not even giving them a choice to join the Primalists or not. So there's a bit of a hypocritical sense on that side too, but I don't even know if Vyranoth is aware of that either. And the angle they're going with Iridikron, it seems like they are kind of going for more of a angle where even the other incarnates are left in the dark. Speaking of Iridikron, saving best for last, Iridikron is the leader of the Primal Incarnates. As before, he is the schemer, the plotter, the planner of the group. Just as everything stated before, we get a very good idea of what his character is and what it represents. We are even told to be worried about him before we even meet him through Nozdormu and Alexstrasza's conversations on their past encounters with him, setting him up to be something to be concerned about, proving to be true once he is unleashed alongside the others. Constantly, Iridikron is shown to be one step ahead of everyone else, and using all of the pieces on the board to his advantage. Even ones that no longer are on it, like Neltharion, or in some case Deathwing, whom in many ways could be argued to be both his successor and predecessor, as an Earth Dragon who made deals with the old gods. Regardless, he uses the Drakthir and the former lair of Neltharion, known as Aberrus, to his advantage in multiple ways, turning all the attention to the caverns instead of on Vyranoth and Iridikron, to Farak and the Sundered Flame, whom Iridikron is aware is following them, and uses that once more to his advantage, by leaving them to their own devices. This leads to Sarkareth's entire meltdown and acceptance to Neltharion's dark legacy, and has us deal with him, which in the end, could have proven to be a new dark ally if Sarkareth had been successful. Either way, Iridikron would have come out on top from this, as Farak meanwhile is also feeding on the same flame that Neltharion had created, the Shadow Flame, further empowering Farak to be used to sow even further destruction. On top of that, Iridikron had made some deals with the Jarden to free their elders from confinement, gaining them even more allies in the process and even more eyes and ears to focus on things beyond him. Iridikron shows us that he means serious business as a clever character, which is so refreshing to have rather than just being told to us that they're smart and never really proving it. And once more, Iridikron is one who sees us as a legitimate threat, which is why he doesn't pull punches with us. I could be mistaken, but I do not have a large memory of too many villains in Warcraft giving us the credit we're deserved, and knowing to take us rather seriously. This is truly explored when we encounter him again after he time travels in the past, with the aid of the Infinites. He holds nothing back against us, and we require Chromie's aid to stop him. But it gets even better. Even in the situation where we stop him from getting access to what he was after, which is empowering the same relic he found in the Forbidden Reach, some form of Dragon Soul prototype, he still managed to succeed in empowering the relic with Galakrond's hunger because he knew Chromie was going to alter time to save Nozdormu from becoming Murozond, and use that to his advantage. Once more, he comes out on top in the situation in the end. Gods, I love everything about this man. Now, once Iridikron has gained what he wanted, he vanishes off into the stars beyond to meet with the Harbinger, Xal'atath, whom is quite the planner and schemer herself, leaving the war to be finished on Farak and Vyranoff's terms. Whether they win or succeed, it doesn't seem to really matter to him because he's got bigger fish to fry, the Titans themselves, whom Iridikron's true vendetta is against. And I for some reason think he can make this happen, given who he has with him and what he's capable of thus far. I've seen people compare Iridikron and Zovol to one another already, and sure, I can see the resemblance of a villain getting what they're after, monologuing about it, about how they're going to win, and go through a portal, and... Wait a second. Xal'atath and Ajara do that too. Oh, anyways.
Skip it up and that up.
While they are similar in their mannerisms, Zovol did not earn his victory, nor did we really understand what he was honestly going after, nor did he really come across as super smart or super clever. People around him were just acting really dumb for no reason. And rewriting an entire universe, I don't think many of us thought that was happening. It wasn't believable. But somebody besting the Titans? It's been done before. We've even done it on some level. But that still isn't really the point. Iridikron comes across as a mastermind who understands we're powerful. Zovol just doesn't. For the first time in a long time, I can actually see a villain be competent, and I don't actually feel like the characters are being nulled around them for no reason. Now, it does seem like Iridikron is out for the moment, and that's probably the biggest downside to all of this, is that he isn't coming back until the Titans do, to gain his own revenge, and I kinda want him to, in a way. That's another weird feeling surrounding Iridikron, is there is an air of understanding of why he is doing all this, and I do hope we get more of his own backstory, just a little bit, but I also think we have enough to figure him out. Some of my favorite villains are those that you're somewhat rooting for, or can at least kind of agree with what they're going with. I do think it's pretty clear that he's a villain though, and not some anti-hero. His openness to let his siblings fall for his cause, when he isn't even there to lead the charge, definitely shows the type of person that he is. But just because you like a villain doesn't mean that they are a good person, or that you fully agree with them. But I also can't see his whole plan happening for quite a bit either. That whole Azeroth being corrupted thing. Unless Vyranoff and Farak do something to the World Tree, or more importantly where it resides, the Emerald Dream, will it result in something massive for Iridikron to start his plan against the Titans, or for the Harbinger, in this case, that Iridikron is betting on, to do her plan, to do her thing. And I'm hoping we see the world take on Farak and Vyranoff to encourage the severity of their plans. Finally, we are getting to what feels like a moment in the story where the stakes are high and it requires not just the aspects to stand up, not just the dragons to stand up, but potentially the Alliance, Horde, and the rest of Azeroth to stand up too. But after the events with the tree and the remaining incarnates are dealt with, I can see an ultimate alliance between Iridikron, Xal'atath, and perhaps even Queen Ajara to make their plans all met. Maybe even some other old gods too. They all want the same thing, just for different reasons, and it's a team up and match up made in heaven, at least in my opinion for Team Void. It certainly sets the stage for the Void coming to Azeroth far more properly, in the similar vein to how Gul'dan helped in making the way for the Legion's third return in Legion. So I do think that a Void expansion is definitely on the horizon, with Iridikron being the one to make the bridge. His promise makes it very clear that a war for Azeroth is coming, and the results will corrupt Azeroth and bring forth the Titans probably. What that'll mean for Illidan and Sargeras is unsure, but I do hope we get to see them again too, which is also very hype. Iridikron is a planner who just gets things done. He either gets it with his own hands dirty, or gets somebody else to, willingly or unwillingly. For a new character to make me feel this way in a single patch or two, through cinematics alone and just one instance, I'm giving this guy some serious high praise, and I hope we see more of him than for just one expansion, maybe even more than 2. He and his siblings are a breath of fresh air, and I hope they break the tropes that we've been dealing with for the past few years. So far they have, and they've all been excellent in their own ways. More of Iridikron and more characters like him, I beg, please. But what are your guys' thoughts on the Incarnates? Which one of them is your favorite? And do you think they'll stand the test of time along with the other Warcraft villains? I'd like to hear your thoughts down below. Feel free to like, comment, subscribe, and all that jazz. Come on and join us on Discord. We talk about all kinds of stuff and things. We'd love to have you. Or you can support me on my Patreon like these amazing folks here. Helps out quite a bit to make these kinds of videos possible. But until next time, my friends, bye!